All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the lineup. My
Hello,
name is
Lily.
Lily Dutay, and I'm a publicist over here at Soho Press. I've got two wonderful people joining me today for this event. So thank you for being here. I'm going to do a little bit of housekeeping, and then I'm going to get out of here and let Nilima and Colin talk to you for the next hour about Nilima's upcoming book. So, of course, if this is your first lineup event, we at Soho Press co produce this series with Mystery to Me Books, which is based in Madison, Wisconsin. It makes a really big deal when we're able to sell some books through this series. So, if you are just in love with Nilima after this and would really like to purchase her book, we have a little green buy button down there that will allow you to pre order the book because this is kind of an advanced conversation, and the book is out on June 10th. In the meantime, we have another event coming up in June. It'll be on June 25th, featuring Camilla Trinchieri and Philip Miller, who are discussing their new international crime novels. You can register for that event now by visiting sohocrimelineup.com. And finally, we are able to do some Q&A here at the very end of this event, right before we announce the gift card winners, because we will also be giving away 3 gift cards at the very end. So if at any point during the event you have a question that you'd like to ask Nilima or Colin, feel free to put it in this little Q&A bubble, which is on the right side of your screen, a question mark in a chat box at any point, and then we will get to them at the end. And without further ado, I am very pleased to introduce you to Colin Cotterill, who is the author of 15 books in the Dr. Siri Paibon series. His fiction has won a Dilys Award and a CWA Dagger in the library. He lives in Chumphon, Thailand, and with his wife and a number of deranged dogs, 8 in fact. And thank you both, Colin and Nilima, for being here. We're very excited about the book. I'm going to go away now. Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thanks, Lily.
Hello, Lily. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Eventually, I'll start to interview Nilima, but before that, I want to talk about me. Um, I have a couple of confessions to make. The first one is that I've never done this before, and I'm actually very nervous. So if I screw up, I feel free to delete my picture from the chat box. To make matters worse, the local temple has just decided today would be a good day for a wedding, and they've been testing the sound system for the last 2 hours. They just stopped for breakfast, I imagine, and they may start again. So forgive me for my neighboring temple. Um, the second confession is that I wasn't sure whether to have my breakfast before the interview or after the interview. So as I'm English, I had to compromise, and this is my breakfast. It's muesli and prunes for obvious reasons, and carrot juice. So I'll do my best not to slurp and crunch noisily during the interview. I just want you to know what situation we're in here. I just want to start with a very small, very short story. We will eventually hear from Nilima, but I want to start with a short story. About 2 years ago, I went to a crime writers convention in Hawaii, and one afternoon I found myself in the bar for some mysterious reason, and there was a reader in the bar who had obviously been on her third or fourth gin and tonic and was looking very distraught. And I went over to find out why. And it turned out that 3 years before, she'd attended a crime writers convention, and her favorite writer was being interviewed. And she sat through the interview, and it was marvelous. She said she learned everything about the writer's background, about where she came from, about why she started to write. And so she left with even more respect for her favorite writer. But there in Hawaii, the same writer had been interviewed once again. And in the words of the reader, she was devastated by the results, because it appeared that every question that she was asked, she gave exactly the same answers that she had given 3 years before. And I said, well, perhaps it's possible that her background hadn't changed over those 3 years. And she said, but that's actually the point, because she's a mystery writer, she's a fictionalist, and she should be able to entertain her. She's obliged to entertain her readers. So, which leads me into this interview with Nilima. I'm not suggesting that you're going to make things up, but feel free, if you wish, feel free to lie about anything you like, because people are never going to remember what you say. So
Okay.
I'll
Well, no,
start.
somebody did. They're going to remember in great detail and bring it up again later.
All right. So what I want to normally, if people stop by my house, they bring me books because they feel sorry for me. And the first thing that I do is I Google the writer. So what I like to do is I like to know the writer before I know the books. So could you perhaps start us off from the very beginning? A very good place to start, from your background, from when the day that you were born, right through to how you ended up as an almost famous author in Australia.
Sure. So I like almost famous. That's great. I don't ever want to be actually famous. That would be too much pressure. So I was born in Fiji. Which is why I keep writing books about Fiji. So Fiji, 1977, bundle of joy, trouble, not sure. Pardon?
No, it's okay. You go.
And so my family moved to Australia when I was 3. So we went to North Queensland, which is North Queensland in the 1980s, not the best at diversity. So yeah, I kind of ignored my Fijian Indian heritage for, the best part of 30 years. And then I started to get interested in, I went to India. I went on a trip to India and saw the poverty there. And that sort of got me interested in how did we escape that cycle of poverty? All I knew was that at some point in the dim and distant past, I didn't even know who, some distant ancestor had moved to Fiji to work in the cane fields. But I didn't know much more than that. So when I went to India and saw the poverty there, I thought I need to find out more about how did we escape this cycle of poverty. And so I learned more about the indentured labour system that took Indians to Fiji. And the more I learnt, the more I thought I'm Fijian Indian. I live not that far away. I didn't know this story. So I thought a lot of people aren't going to know. A lot of people from Australia go to Fiji as tourists. They don't know about the history. They don't know about why there's so many Indians there. So I thought this is a good thing to explore. And I read fiction. So I wanted to write something fictional. And crime seemed like a good way to go. So I wanted to write something that you could read on the beach while learning a little bit of the history of the place that you're in. So that was my sort of inspiration for writing the stories.
So your parents actually didn't know India?
Nope. So it was my great grandparents who went to Fiji as indentured labourers. So my grandparents, I believe, were born in Fiji. My parents and my older sister and I were born in Fiji. And I've got 2 younger sisters who were born in Australia. But yeah, so there were, what's that, 3, 4 generations in Fiji, and before we ended up coming over to Australia.
And did the Indian workers have any rights in Burma? Could they vote? Were they allowed to buy houses or land?
So basically, the way the indenture system worked was that it was set up because the British Empire, slavery had been abolished, but they still had all of these colonies that wanted cheap labor. And so the Fijian economy was based on sugarcane, and yet they needed cheap labor. And so they started importing Indian labor over to Fiji. The Indians in India would technically sign a contract. They were mostly illiterate. They were the poorest of the poor, so they didn't necessarily know what they were signing up for because they were signing a contract that they couldn't read. They were being told what was the terms of the contract by people who were paid to get them onto the ship. So they weren't necessarily telling the whole truth. And then once they got there, they were effectively slaves. They got paid a little bit. They got paid, but not a huge amount. Often the food was quite expensive, so whatever they got paid got spent on food. They were given accommodation. It was not the nicest accommodation, and actually sort of halfway through the program, the rules were changed. It was all very documented, that exactly how big their houses had to, like their little rooms had to be, how far away the kitchens had to be, how far away the toilets had to be. All of that sort of stuff was regulated, though of course it then required enforcement of the regulations, which seemed to have been a bit haphazard. But halfway through the program, the 20-something years that it ran in Fiji, they actually changed the regulations about the housing to make it better, because it was really pretty grim at the beginning of the system. So yes, did they have rights? They didn't have a huge amount of rights. Things like which plantation they went to, what kind of work they did, they didn't have any rights about that. They didn't have rights to get married, so they had to ask permission to get married.
And sorry, were the landowners English, or were they Fijian?
No, so the plantations were being run by, the term they used at the time was Europeans, so it could be English, it could be Australian, New Zealanders, like they seemed to predominantly be the landowners. And they were selling the sugar cane to a company called CSR, who is still operate in Australia today. CSR literally stands for Colonial Sugar Refining, so it's right there in the name. And I mean, I still have CSR sugar. So and CSR had a real monopoly in the colony. They set the prices. They set the prices low, which is why they wanted cheap labor, which is why they were getting the Indians over. And CSR actually owned some of the plantations as well, and owned the mills where the plantation got processed. So it was a real monopoly.
How did the Fijians fit into this ménage à trois here?
So the Fijians were... when the British came into Fiji, the British came into Fiji somewhat reluctantly, to be honest. Like the Fijians asked to join the British Empire a couple of times. The first time it was just a straight no, and the second time they did it because the Fijians needed help with apparently a debt to the American Navy. I don't know if that's apocryphal, but that's the story I've heard. So when they came in, this is one of the later colonies in the British Empire. So I think it was late 1800s that they became a colony. And I guess they'd learnt some lessons from previous colonies. So they came in and went, well, we don't want to interrupt the indigenous people's way of life. There's a bit of a noble savage type thing about it. So they went, well, we're not going to allow them to work on the plantations. Meanwhile, Fijians were being knocked on the head and taken to North Queensland to work in sugarcane plantations. But in Fiji itself, no, they didn't allow them to work on the sugarcane plantations. The idea was that they should maintain their traditional way of life. So the Fijians were kind of blocked out of a lot of the economic development that was going on in Fiji. And what I've read is that they were a bit puzzled by these Indians who were showing up in their country. They didn't quite understand the culture. They didn't understand why they were allowing themselves to be somewhat enslaved. So that they were, in terms of this whole plantation thing, they were a bit on the periphery.
So the Indians didn't actually feel a sense of belonging ever in Fiji?
I mean, I'd say now, I would represent myself as Fijian Indian Australian. But there has always been tension. To this day, there's still tension. There's been a series of coups in Fiji, and those are all kind of based around racial tensions. And to be fair, the Fijian people, they, by the by the time of the first coup, which was in the late 1980s, I think it was 88 or something like that, there were more Indians in Fiji than there were Fijians. Like they'd gotten, Indians were like 50 something percent. So just a little bit more, but still more than the Indigenous people. And at this point, it's now down to something like 37% because everyone kind of got out because of all of these coups that were going on and sort of tightening restrictions on whether Indians could have land. So in the early years in colonization, when the books are set, as Indians finished their 5-year indenture contracts, they could attempt to get land. It wasn't the easiest thing to do to get land, but they were able to get land, to have small farms, to make a living in Fiji. And then later, after the British left and as these coups occurred, those leases have been withdrawn, and so Indians have lost their farms and that sort of thing. So, it's never, I guess, been the smoothest sailing in terms of that racial tension, but things are not like, if you go to Fiji, you're not going to see it. It's even the coups that occurred, they're not violent. Like, one guy died, to my knowledge, and he died because he had a heart attack, not because he was shot or injured during the coups. So it's not a violent place. The racial tensions don't erupt into violence. It's more political, I think.
So let's slip over to a more joyful experience. So there you were, this little baby, and your parents, did they have trouble getting to Australia as a family? What did they do about visas?
It's an excellent question. I only vaguely know that. I think my father already had a sister living in Australia, and her husband maybe had come over because he was a town planner. I'm not quite sure, but I'm pretty sure we were sponsored over on a family type visa. It has at various times been easier and harder. Australia's also had this lovely thing called the White Australia policy, which only got lifted, I think, in the either late 70s or early 80s. So we were one of the first families to come over after the White Australia policy. I really keep bringing it back to grim things, don't I?
All right, so you you were born overseas, but your parents eventually got citizenship in Australia,
Yeah, yep. So yeah, we've been
and
citizens.
you entered the education system as an Australian.
Uh Probably, yeah. If not
And
immediately, then fairly shortly afterwards, yeah.
so, what kind of a student were you? What kind of a child did you become?
I was I was a good student, I guess. I was mischievous, I think my parents would say. By Australian standards, I was an absolute angel. By traditional Indian standards, I might have been a bit naughty.
And somewhere along the line, you decided that you wanted to write. What
Yeah, I
brought that
mean,
upon you?
I was a huge reader, so you know, other kids would get in trouble for being out too long, or you know, I don't know, playing too much. My older sister and I would both get in trouble for reading too much. My mum would say there are other things in life, you have to do other things as well. So I was always a huge reader. I had a high school project, year 12, and we were tasked with writing a journal all year. And my teacher had said, I don't want to hear about your boyfriends. I want you to hear about your reflections about life. And I got an A plus. And she used my journal for the subsequent years as a sample. So I did not write about boyfriends. I don't think I had any boyfriends. It was an all-girls school, and I didn't know anyone. I think that was the first time I went, okay, I can do this writing thing. But I then left it for years. I went to uni, I got a degree, I went and started working, and then one day sort of went, I don't love this. IT malarkey as much as other things. So I went and did a writing course and did more writing courses and wrote short stories, and then eventually this idea for these books set in Fiji came along, and that's what I've done.
Well, why crime? Sorry, why? What made you decide that crime was your best outlet?
So I mean, I read a lot of fantasy, and so I was probably trying to write something. I was trying to write something in fantasy. I didn't really have any ideas, and then this thought of writing something about Fiji came along, and I couldn't think of how to get dragons into Fiji, so I went for crime because I used to read a lot of crime when I was young, and it was a way to set something in Fiji, have it as a sort of fiction that I would enjoy reading, that's hence crime. So I went back and started reading a lot of crime, especially crime set in interesting places, hence coming across Colin and his books that are all set in Laos.
That's me, folks. That's me.
Yes.
So, but see, both of us wrote about places that the majority of people couldn't find on the world atlas. Now, do you think that helped in getting published in the first place? That we were different, that we had an interesting location, which actually took first place as opposed to your writing ability and your storytelling.
Oh, well, I'd like to think the writing ability and storytelling had something to do with it. But yes, I do think I do think writing in sort of that niche location, and like having an authentic connection to that location. I know you lived in Laos for years, right? So yeah, and I'm Fijian Indian. So I do think that makes a big difference. I think that people want to hear about these places that they might never get to visit, and I think that writing in that historical context where something sort of very dramatic is happening in the country that changes the reality for that country for a long time is also part of the appeal.
And so the first book becomes a reality. Can you tell us a bit about that first book? I'm sure Lily's off camera saying, ask her about the books, ask her about the books. And she's wondering, she's worried that I'm never going to get around to it. So can you tell us about the first book, the title and why, the concept behind it?
Yep. So the first book was A Disappearance in Fiji. So it follows the story of Sergeant Akal Singh, who is a Sikh police officer. And he starts his career to much glory in Hong Kong, and then he makes a pretty big mistake, a pretty big embarrassing mistake, and he gets sent off to Fiji in disgrace. So this is all the old boys network of governors. So the governor of Hong Kong chats to his mate, the governor of Fiji, and sends Akal over there rather than just dismissing him outright. So when he gets to Fiji, he's pretty miserable. Nobody likes him. They all know that some say he did something in Hong Kong that's covered him in shame. So he's not having a very good time of it. And then a woman disappears off a plantation, an Indian labourer disappears off a plantation, and it's a politically sensitive time. There's a lot of outrage about the indenture system in India. There's a delegation who've come over to Fiji at that time to look into these alleged abuses. So Akal's dispatched off to the plantation to investigate the crime, and he finds he observes what life is like for the indentured labourers, and he uncovers abuses that he didn't know existed. That's sort of with no real spoilers. That's the overview of the first book.
And did you have the story first? I mean, did you when you did research for it, were you doing research based on the idea that you had for the book?
When I started doing research for this book, I had a completely different story. I had a dual chronology with two female leads, and one was burnt out corporate type who'd gone back to Fiji to rediscover her roots, which was me, except I'm not an alcoholic. And I can't remember what else. She was like high-powered lawyer or something, whereas I was just like mildly dissatisfied with my IT career and yeah, a bit tired.
What changed? What happened? Did you have a traumatic experience that changed your mind?
About the book, I just couldn't make it work. The other main character was a young indentured labourer, so that was kind of my way of showing the indenture system was through the eyes of this young girl. But I couldn't have her investigate a crime. She just had no agency. She had no ability to move around, no ability to ask any questions. All she was ever doing was overhearing things. I think I got about, I don't know, 6,000 words in, and I couldn't make her do anything. And as I was looking, so I was in Fiji at the time, I was looking at the old newspapers on microfilm at the National Archives there on this dinky machine that kept, like, the little winder thing kept falling out and making this huge noise, and everyone kept glaring at me. Anyway, that's off topic. I was looking at the old newspapers, and I found out about these police officers I found out that they were having a hard time setting up the fledgling police force in the colony, and that the Old Boys Network of the governor of Hong Kong had formerly been the governor of Fiji, and he was chatting, I imagine, in a old, wood panelled room in stuffed leather chairs, smoking pipes, with slippers on. I don't know what old white guys did back then, but they arranged this exchange of the Hong Kong police officers to Sikh police officers to come over. So 10 Hong Kong police officers went to Fiji as an exchange, as a favor, basically, and they did really well. And so they got noticed and they got mentioned in the newspapers, and I sort of went, oh, hold on, I could have this as my protagonist, and this person can actually investigate the crime. And so I scrapped the dual chronology and went with that was how Akal was born. Yeah.
So what did you do with it? You had your finished manuscript. Did you show it to friends first, or did you just go straight to the jugular?
No, I was in the process of having some friends review every scene. So I was going from second draft to third draft, and I feel like this is an opportune time to explain how Colin and I actually met, because we
Should I put the music on in the background?
It was so romantic. Is that what you're getting at? It was not. Well, it was kind of romantic on my side. So my then boyfriend had for my birthday. I had told him when I started when we started dating, I'd said to him this. I think he's actually on the call, but I had sent him. I'd shown him Colin's book and said, this is what I'm aspiring to write. So Colin's first Dr. Siri book. So the Coroner's Lunch, and I said, this is what I'm aspiring to write. And he had, I'm pretty sure he never read the book, but he did take note of the name. And for my birthday, he contacted Colin to make a cartoon, which is the one that's on the wall behind me. And so Colin and I met that way.
I'm still available for commissions, very cheap. Just get in touch through Soho. Is that free? Okay, your friends gave you the go ahead. They liked the book, and you sent it off to Soho.
Yes.
Were you surprised that they got back to you? Were you?
Yes.
Of course, you're pleased, but how shocked were you?
I was stunned. So, I hadn't sent this to any publishers. I was expecting, I wanted to finish the third draft. So I sent it to Soho. Soho asked for a chapter or a piece, and I sent them the best bit, which was somewhere in the middle, and they asked to see the rest of the book. And I, in my absolute naivety, went, oh, it's not really ready yet. I didn't know that when a publisher asks you for a book, you just send the book.
Just shut up and do it. Just get it out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, it's not really ready yet. Let me finish the third draft and I'll send it to you. So like 9 months later, I sent it to them. And then they said, we'd like to have a meeting. And I was like, oh, cool. They're going to give me feedback. So I got onto the meeting and it was like, because of the US Australia time difference, it was 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning, something like that. And so they're like, da 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 da, we like this, we like that. You got to change the name, da 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 da. And then at the end, I was like, okay, cool. So what are next steps? Thinking that the next steps are going to be they're going to formalize an email to me with the feedback and maybe they'll look at the next draft. And they're like, well, we'll maybe get a contract to you. We're going to have a chat about it, but we should be getting a contract to you in the next week or so. And I was like, yeah, oh, okay. Trying to play it cool. I was not at all cool. And then there was a mad dash after that to try and find some champagne because that was a big deal, no matter that it was 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. All the bottle shops were closed. But yeah, Andy and I were definitely toasting that morning.
And it was published.
And it was published.
How did your life change once that book became a reality?
Yeah, I do panels now and interviews. And I got to be on ABC Radio and there was a New York Times write-up and it was just amazing. So at the moment I am writing full-time. I normally do have a day job. I normally still do tech stuff to, earn a living. But I am writing, I'm finding opportunities to write full-time. I contract, so between contracts I write. And I've just finished the first draft of the third book. And I just recorded my author's note for book 2, which was heaps of fun. Okay,
you're going too fast for me. Slow down. I'm elderly. So book 1 led to book 2.
Yes.
Tell us about book 2.
So book 2, we're still with Akal. He's having a slightly better time of things now. So he's made some friends. So in book 1, he already had one friend, Taviti, who helps him in the adventures in book 1, but he's made another friend. So Dr. Robert Holmes, who is kind of his partner in the caper in book 1. So he's got a couple of friends. He's starting to settle into life in Fiji. And then but his inspector general still doesn't like him. He is sent off to a town called Levuka, which is the historical capital of Fiji. It's beautiful. I love it there. It's my favorite place in Fiji. It's just like sleepy.
You do research there as well? Sorry.
Yeah. I went there a couple of times. So the first time, 2016, when I was doing research for the first book, I spent a few days in Levuka and I thought this place is amazing. And I sort of thought, could I stay here and write the book? And yeah, so it is my favorite place in Fiji.
So did you stay there and write the book or not?
I did not. No, I kind of decided that writing is a pretty lonely existence to start off with. And going to a town where I don't know anybody and writing a book seemed like maybe not the best idea.
Sounds ideal. So, you don't know anybody, you're not interrupted, you have a month to do whatever you want to do. Sounds perfect.
Well, a month would have been great. Yeah, no, I was like, can I live here, basically?
Okay.
Yeah. So yes. So Akal goes off to Levuka, and Taviti decides to go along with him because Levuka is his home village is very close to Levuka. So Akal's been sent over there to do what everyone considers to be sort of nuisance and errands. He's escorting a couple of Australian women who patently do not need to be escorted. They are headstrong, or at least especially the younger woman, Catherine, is headstrong. She's an aspiring journalist and all she wants to do is run around and find juicy stories and get herself into trouble. So Akal's supposed to be supervising her or escorting her, making sure that she's safe, her and her aunt Mary. So that's one of the nuisance jobs. The other one is there's a young constable who is like 18. He is jumping at shadows in Levuka and he's there on his own. The senior officer has retired. And so this young constable is there on his own, jumping at shadows. One of those shadows is some Europeans have been spied lurking about in Levuka. It's alleged that they're Germans, so and there's a lot of panic about Germans, even so far away from World War One. There's a lot of panic about Germans in Fiji. So he's sent off to investigate this allegation of these mysterious Germans lurking about Levuka, and also just to mentor this young constable who is needs some help. So he's not super thrilled about all the tasks he's being sent on, but he's never been to Levuka. Daviti's coming with him. He figures he's going to get to check out this new place and meet Daviti's family. And the good thing about this is that he gets to stay in a Fijian village, which he's never done before, which means you, as the reader, get to see a little bit of what life is like in a Fijian village. Of course, when he gets there, murder and mayhem ensue.
Good old mystery. So your Sergeant Singh actually makes a lot of bad decisions based on relationships with women who are not suitable. Was he based on somebody you know?
No, really not. I don't know why he makes so many bad decisions about women, but he does. He's trying really hard on this one not to make bad decisions about Catherine.
Questions have started coming in. I've got a question here from Denise that said, "Do you have a favorite character in one of your two books?"
I love the Doctor. The Doctor's my favourite. Most people tell me Taviti's their favourite. Some people say Akal's their favourite, but my favourite's the Doctor, just because he just wrote himself. I mean, to be fair, Taviti wrote himself as well, but the Doctor just he's my guy. Akal, like, there are lots of bits of me in Akal, so so that's a bit harder. It's a bit more confronting.
And was the Doctor based on anybody?
No, just honestly, he might be a bit stereotypical. I don't know. He's just what I imagine to be a bit of a liberal, liberal sort of scientific, caring person. Who's a bit anti-establishment. He's not a fan of how the colonies run and how the Indians are being treated in particular. So he's a bit of a bleeding heart.
Have you noticed yet how readers begin to identify with characters and become sort of family members and boyfriends and girlfriends not to fictional characters? I mean, my Dr. Siri, he has a fan club of ladies of a certain age who don't write to me; they write to him.
Really?
I mean, do you have anybody? Do you have anybody committed to the characters yet?
No, I don't think so. I get a lot of questions about who would be cast for different roles. I've been plugging for Dev Patel, but he's aging out. I don't think Dev is a real candidate anymore. But the audiobook narrator, Sid Sagar, who I met while I was in the UK, he would be a perfect Akal. So but no, nobody who's directing questions to any of the characters.
And the inevitable question about your writing process. I used to get a lot of questions that made me wonder that people really didn't know what it was like to be a writer. So, for example, somebody said to me once, "What do you wear when you're writing?" As if what I wear when I'm writing makes any difference to the product. But the fact was, I think at one stage I said, I don't wear anything. And it was a chat line, and it went quiet for a long time. And then the next chat line was, "Are you writing anything at the moment?" I didn't answer that one. So what's your process? What's your writing process?
So I do a lot. I'm a plotter, so I definitely figure out my overall plot first. I don't know how to do crime any other way. So crime for me, I need to know who dies, why do they die, who kills them, how did they do it, why did they do it. So I'm a plotter. I figure out my overall. I kind of do like a synopsis, and with the overall plot elements, then I break that down into scenes, and then I start writing scene by scene. I also come from a project background, so for me, I like to have a bit of a project plan. I think my editor Taz, the first time she saw I sent her a spreadsheet of my plan for the edit, for the first edit, and I think it confused her and thrilled her a little bit, but mostly confused her. So I've shielded her from that ever since. But yeah, I'm very much a planner and a plotter. I write in clothes because I normally write at libraries or I worked in a co-working space for a while because that kind of, gives me the, oh, I'm at work vibe. Yes, so definitely clothed. And I didn't used to be able to write at home. So I just, that was not a goal for me. But then we all went into lockdown for 2 years. At least in Melbourne, we went into lockdown for the better part of 2 years. So I learned I definitely learned how to edit at home. And I did have to write some new scenes and do some structural edits. So yeah, I learned how to write at home. I still prefer writing outside of home though.
Do you think there still would have been a book if we hadn't had COVID?
I think so. I think it would have just taken longer. There wasn't much else to do, so I was writing a lot and working a lot on the book.
I've got another question. This one still from Denise is asking questions a lot here. So when
Welcome,
did you
Denise.
know you wanted to be a writer? So we talked about you suddenly arriving in Australia and reading a lot, but are you a writer now? Do you see yourself, if people say, what do you do for a living? Do you still tell them you're IT or do you tell them I'm a writer?
No, I actually open with writer, especially right now, because that is what I'm doing right now. So I have changed my resume to say both, because I'm day job hunting at the moment, to say both business analyst and data analyst and writer. So I think I put now technology professional and writer. So, but in personal interactions, I would say writer first now.
Could you write anything else, anything different? Fictional?
Yeah, I have an idea for something, a fantasy series or novel at least. So I think that I might be pursuing that one at some point. I'm deep in book 3 for Akal at the moment, so it's just sort of a twinkle in my eye at the moment. But yeah, I'm thinking about some fantasy.
Do you have a good relationship with your editor? Do you get away with things that you're surprised that the editor lets you do?
No, she doesn't let me get away with anything. But no, I have a great relationship with Taz. She's my cheerleader. She's seen me cry. She's been through all my relationship woes with me. She's great. And she loves the books. And yeah, I feel a lot of rapport with Taz.
So you have the third book is almost finished. Can you give us a sort of a quickie, what it's about?
Yeah, no, just first draft. So there's a slightly more appropriate romance for Akal in this
Thank
one.
goodness, the poor guy is so many.
Yeah, I haven't made it easy for him. He doesn't make it easy for himself. I don't know. And he's going to be wrestling with a decision. He's going to have an opportunity to leave Fiji to do something prestigious and important and exciting, and he has to decide whether to stay or go. And he's going to be investigating a crime. So I don't know if I said this before, but in the first book, we're very focused on the plantation. We're focused on what life is like for the indentured labourers. The second book is kind of got two focuses. One is the life of people who've finished their contracts and are now living free in the colony. so the Indians. And then also I've gotten a bit braver about representing some Indigenous Fijian culture. I kind of really veered away from that in the first book because I didn't grow up around Itaukei people, the Indigenous Fijian people. So I was a bit wary of writing about it, but you can't really write a series set in Fiji without ever really giving the Fijians some real airtime. So I wrote more about them in the second book. And then in the third book, the focus is going to be on that question of stay or go. So I've got some Indian labourer characters who have to face this question, and that's who the mystery is revolved around. And then Akal is also facing that question of stay or go.
Have you had any feedback from Fijians or Indians in Fiji?
Yep, definitely. So there's not been a lot of fiction written that focuses on Fiji, focuses on Fijian Indians, Fijians, the country. Like sometimes it's a backdrop for some other mystery or something like that, but it's not been about Fiji. So I think people are just really people have told me how happy they are that there is something that talks about their culture and their history and Fiji itself. I get a lot of people telling me how proud they are of me, which like they take it's a really communal kind of country. Fijians themselves, the indigenous Fijians, they don't really have a concept of property. Everything is everyone's. So I think that for them, this is theirs as well.
Has there been any feedback that would make you change something if you could go back again to the beginning?
Somebody picked me up on using the wrong version of hello. I think I'd written namaskaram and they said it should be namaskar with the people. So, but no, not really. I don't think so. No one's given me like big concerns about the way I've represented people or incidents or the political or racial context. For the second book, I got a sensitivity reader, so I've worked a lot with the University of the South Pacific. I worked with academics there while I was doing the research to make sure I was representing the Fijian culture as well as I could. And I got one of the academics there to read the book and just make sure that there wasn't anything in there that could offend. So no, I've been quite careful about that. So yeah, I haven't really had any feedback that would make me change anything at this point.
I think that Lily has some questions from outside. Are you still lurking there in the corridor, Lily? Are you in our background? No, she's gone. Yeah, there you go. So,
Hi,
did you get any questions from the floor?
I'm back. Yes, I have a few more questions from the floor. First of all, thank you both for coming on and spending your evening with us. And thank you, everybody who's been tuning in. We have another question about researching. How hard was it to research life in Fiji over 100 years ago?
Yeah, it was not the simplest thing. One great resource that I've got is the newspapers. So in Fiji, I was able to look at the newspapers on microfilm. I live in Melbourne, Victoria, and I can almost see the State Library from my balcony. And our State Library actually has all of the old newspapers in these enormous leather-bound volumes that take two people to lift. So I go there and regularly look at the newspapers. There's little clips of articles at the beginning of each chapter, and those all come from, those are all actual articles from the Fiji Times from back in around that time. It's not necessarily the date that's listed in the book because I want that to be sort of chronological, but it's all from around sort of between 1914 and 1917. So that's one of the really good resources. And then the University of South Pacific in Suva, they've got this Pacific collection in their library, which I can sort of sign up as an external user. And the librarians there are brilliant and the resources are really good. Like they've got all of these little pamphlets and things that have been preserved. But the part that's really challenging is actually representing the indentured servants. Like they were generally illiterate. They didn't really have, so there's no real written records. There's very little. There's no journals or anything like that of how it felt to be an indentured labourer in Fiji. So, and by the time I came to do this research, those people had passed. So you know, I've got the observations of Europeans. So there were missionaries who went over. I've got their observations. The newspapers are commenting on it. I've got their observations. And then other than that, I've got those regulations. So I can still find the regulations about what the housing needed to be like, how much people could get paid, the information about how they could get land after their indenture. And so there's that sort of thing, but there's not that lived experience side of things. So that is coming from up here, and I hope that I've done a good job of it.
Do you have any family photographs from your parents or your grandparents?
Yes, but that's not going back far enough, really. But that's the sort of thing I've had to rely on. Even the names in the books, they're not quite accurate. I think there's one person, Magumma was my grandmother's name. So in first book, I've got my grandmother's name as one of the characters, and the name of Kunti, the woman who has disappeared in the first book. She is based on a woman. There's a story called Kunti's Lament, and she was an indentured labourer who was being harassed by one of the overseers, like was trying to rape her, and so she jumps in the river and is rescued by a boy in a dinghy. And so there's this whole story about her. So I used her name. But most of the names are names that would not have actually existed at the time because their names were long and complicated. I didn't want to put off readers with a bunch of names that they couldn't pronounce and couldn't sort of stick in their head. So I have used much more modern names in the book. I feel like I've answered a question that nobody asked, but that's probably okay.
You didn't need me at all. You could have done it all by yourself.
Just rabbit it on for hours. Were there any other questions, Lily?
Yes. So from Andrew, we have, you once mentioned that a film adaptation would be the ultimate dream come true. Is that still on your wish list?
Oh yeah, that's definitely yeah, it would be amazing. Like I said, I already know who to cast for some of the roles. Colin, you could probably be the Doctor. I feel like you would do okay as the Doctor. I just would like to be an extra, I think.
And you deserve that. You definitely should be. This is neither here nor there. Quick side note before we get into our giveaway winners, but I was reading through some of your author questionnaires that you filled out for us today, Nilima. And today, unbeknownst to us planning this, is Gurmit Day, right? May 14th? Yeah. For us in the United States. Do you want to talk about that really quickly, just because it's a silly coincidence that
Yeah.
Totally planned.
Yeah, no, that's great. I've missed it. So Gurmit Day is the name of the contract that the Indians signed to go to Fiji. Apparently, it's a bastardization of the English word agreement, and people couldn't pronounce it, so they'd say Gurmit, and then that became the sort of unofficial name for it. So the people who went to Fiji were called Gurmitias. So this is a recent thing. Fiji has been trying to do a better job of integrating the two cultures and celebrating the Indian history. So I think this is the third year that they've had this thing called Gurmit Day, which is the celebration of the day the first Indians landed in Fiji. And yeah, it's kind of amazing that is now something that is being celebrated in Fiji, and sort of bringing it back to the public awareness.
Yeah, how apt for this to land on that day for those of us in the States.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you for explaining that. And thank you both. It's really early for Colin, although not for Colin's schedule. And Nilima, thank you for joining us and celebrating your book with us. Thanks everybody for tuning in, especially those of you who are familiar faces who have tuned in before. We're glad to have you back. Now we are going to announce our gift card winners. We have a $25 gift card to Mystery to Me going to Karen M. Thank you, Karen, for tuning in. We have a $50 gift card going to Andrew Umney. Thank you for tuning in, Andrew. And then our big gift card, our $75 gift card, is going to Lori Edelson. So thank you all for tuning in. Elizabeth, who is our tech extraordinaire behind the scenes here, will be emailing everybody after this event with instructions on how to use your gift card to purchase Nilima's book or whatever you desire. Any closing thoughts, Nilima, Colin?
No, I had great fun. I was petrified at the thought of doing this, but Elena made it really easy for me. So I appreciate that. It was fun.
Yeah, this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah, I hope people enjoy the book, and I'm looking forward to getting the feedback from people.
Wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night if you're over here. Have a great day, Nilima and Colin. And we'll see you next month for another event, everyone.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lily. Thanks, Colin.
Bye bye.